Thanks for joining me on the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. The death toll from floods in Indonesia surpasses 500. Russian missile attack kills 4 people in Ukraine's Dnipro city. Plus, Nigerian ambassadors react to President Bola Tinubu's newly released list of ambassadorial nominees. Let's begin the world today. More than 500 people are said to have died in floods that struck Indonesia last week. Caused by a rare cyclone, the floods hit 3 provinces and impacted some 1.4 million people. At least 500 people have also been reported missing, while thousands more have been injured. Indonesia's provinces of Aceh, North Sumatra and West Sumatra have been the hardest hit, with thousands still cut off and without critical supplies. Aid workers have been trying to reach people on foot and by motorcycle, as many roads are still impassable to larger vehicles. Many people are still waiting for food aid, with some saying they have not eaten for up to 2 to 3 days. And happening in the Ukrainian city of Dnipro, 4 people have been killed, at least 40 others injured in what has been described as a Russian missile attack. Reports say the attack took place this morning. Videos shared online showed a large explosion occur on the side of a motorway, and local media said an office block, cars and shops were hit or badly damaged. Dnipro, which lies around 100 kilometers from the front line, has frequently come under Russian attack since the start of Moscow's full-scale invasion in February of 2022. The attack came a day before U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is due to meet with President Vladimir Putin in Moscow for talks aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. Witkoff has visited the Russian president several times this year, but has never been to Kyiv. On Sunday, a Ukrainian delegation met with Witkoff, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner in Florida. New information has emerged from the shooting of 2 National Guard members in the U.S. capital, Washington, D.C. The man accused of carrying out the attack is said to have spent weeks at a time alone in a dark room and had suffered manic episodes. That's according to comments written in a 2024 documents by a caseworker who had helped the suspect's family with their relocation from the United States after they fled Afghanistan. The suspect, Rahamanullah Lakanwal, is accused of carrying out the ambush that killed 20-year-old Beckstrom and seriously injured 24-year-old Andrew Wolf. The 29-year-old suspect is set to have entered the U.S. in 2021 as part of a program for Afghans who had worked with American troops in Afghanistan. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said Mr. Lakanwal had been radicalized since he's been in the United States, and that officials believed this happened through connections in his home community and state. He lived with his wife and 5 children in Bellingham, Washington, a state on the other side of the country from where last week's attack took place. And in the wave of the shooting in the D.C. area, the U.S. President Donald Trump announced a pause on visas to 19 high-risk countries. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird had a chat with a co-founder and co-director of Afghans for a Better Tomorrow, Arash Asisada, on the decision by the U.S. president.
Arash, thank you so much for joining us. As we know, we are in a very critical time, and as the co-founder and co-director of Afghans for a Better Tomorrow, you are at the front lines of this. Tell us exactly, what does this mean? We know the president has put a stop to all Afghans moving into the United States. We also know that there has been a pause on third world country immigrants coming to the U.S. Tell us, what does this really mean? And we know there's no true designation right now as to what a third world country is considered.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I think we're still trying to figure out the policy implications of these announcements, which are ranging from memos issued by USCIS that say, no more visas for Afghan nationals, as well as immigration-related processing. And I think what we'll be trying to do starting tomorrow is what does this really mean? Because that's the question we are getting from, our community members, 200,000 newly arrived Afghans since the U.S. withdrawal in 2021. And I think the main question that we want to pose is that, what are the real life implications for our community members? Because at this moment, they're deeply petrified. They're really worried. And in our view, honestly, if we take a really honest look at what's been happening, is that the Trump administration is using this incident, this tragic incident that our community condemns. Our community always is opposed to violence, as a community that's been fleeing violence and political persecution from their home country to come to the United States in the first place. But what we see is a racial demagoguing. We see scapegoating of our community for the action of one person who doesn't really quite represent our community at all. In fact, what we've learned about his roots is that he was trained by the Central Intelligence Agency. He has a long history with the CIA and U.S. Special Forces. And so I think, at the moment we're just trying to figure out what are going to be the real life implications of these policy announcements. Are they just tweets? Are they just announcements? But we are bracing for the worst, which is this will have real, lasting, harmful effects for the African American community, for Afghan refugees, and specifically people who are in the pipeline to essentially be granted safety here in the United States.
And we know that the Biden administration put this in place, asylum, because of some of the life-threatening risk for individuals who have served as special forces. Tell us, those individuals you mentioned that are in the pipeline, what could actually happen at this point if they are not granted access into the United States? And for those who are here, could they potentially have to go back to Afghanistan? What are some of the things that could be potential implications?
Yeah, I think the implications of this will be broad, and all of it will be bad. The negative implications can range from a deportation to a third world country. We've seen Afghans be deported from a southern border to places like Nicaragua or Panama. What we're also seeing is people are having, Afghans who are already here, having their green card ceremonies canceled. We saw that in the past 3-4 days since the shooting and President Trump's policy announcements. And then lastly, I think it's important to note that there are, tens of thousands of Afghans who stood by the United States mission for 20 years, who qualify for a visa to the United States, who either already were banned by the June announcement of a Muslim travel ban. It's wider than just Muslim countries, but we perceive it to be a Muslim travel ban on which Afghanistan is all on the red, most restricted list. And then this really closes the loophole for anybody else who was left behind. And these were folks who served alongside U.S. military forces, might have worked with intelligence agencies, they might have worked with U.S. media, as well as aid agencies, all of whom qualified by law to be able to come with their family to the United States, Afghan allies, as we like to call them, who will now be left behind. And I think the consequences for them could be definitely deadly. We've seen stories of Afghans who've been deported from neighboring countries, Pakistan, awaiting resettlement to the United States via that third country and that consulate. And we've seen them go back, be detained, be tortured, and even horrific stories of rape and sexual assault at the hands of the Taliban. And so really what they face is a cruel regime that is going to be kind of extrajudicious in how they carry out the justice against anybody who they deem affiliated to the U.S., whether that affiliation is actually real. For many that is real, and for many people whose it's just a perception of having supported, having attended a cultural event, or having lived or worked near a former U.S. military base.
Now, we know advocacy organizations have been very busy over the last few days, despite the holiday that the U.S. has been through. But we know Congress is definitely going to be back in session come Monday. Are there any expected hearings that congressional members are going to put in place around this potential policy and some of what the Trump administration has put forth? What are you hearing from Congress?
I think we're really expecting Congress to put up a fight, to actually take a stand and set a course for what could be a reversal for this. And I think Congress could take the lead on this. We've always noted that the issue of Afghan refugees is a bipartisan one. The legislation to give Afghan refugees who were evacuated post-2021 after U.S. withdrawal is bipartisan legislation, one of the only few immigration-related pieces in Congress that has support from friends of Donald Trump, as well as deeply progressive and Democrats in Congress. And what I'll say is that partially why President Trump is able to harm our community in this moment is because Congress failed to act in the years previous to his term. It failed to pass the Afghan Adjustment Act, which would have given almost 100,000 or more Afghans lasting protections that would keep them safe. But now I think folks are worried about expiring work authorizations, expiring legal protections, and I think that makes them deeply vulnerable to kidnapping by ICE and CBP. And I think that's why the messages I'm getting from our community is we are deeply petrified. What are we supposed to do? And there's also a deep sense of betrayal, saying, how can the United States do this to us? We supported it. We sacrificed so much. I lost a family member who was killed by the Taliban. I lost a leg in a Taliban explosion, fighting for what's right and standing by the United States. And so, it's been a tough few weeks within our community.
Yes, and so as we close, what are you expecting to happen next? What is your organization planning to do now that we're in this time?
Yeah, I think we're really shifting to having community-led defense practices for Afghan refugees. I think we've been watching and been deeply saddened and shocked by the videos that we've all seen of ICE and CBP coming into the interior of the United States, coming into city, snatching people, immigrants, whether they were here legally or undocumented. And I think maybe there was a sense that the Afghan community would be spared because of our maybe relation to the war, to the 20-year intervention that the United States led. And I think, I think that we're now at a point where we realize that the Trump administration's policy is bigoted, it's racist, and it's deeply cruel. And just because we are in the Afghan community, actually, we now are in the crosshairs of this administration. So it's a very nervous time, but our organization, our community is prepared to kind of fight back, whether that's in the halls of power in Congress, on the streets of Washington, D.C. or New York City, as well as any kind of proceedings we can take to court to fight this as hard as we can. Because, as I said, it's unjust, it's deeply cruel, and just not how you would treat allies who often sacrificed more than U.S. service members over the course of the 20 years of the war.
Well, Raj, thank you so much for joining us. We will definitely be speaking with you again soon if time permits. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Our correspondent Maria Bird with Arash, the co-founder and co-director of Afghans for a Better Tomorrow. And reactions continue to trail President Bola Tinubu's list of ambassadorial nominees, which he has forwarded to the Senate. The list includes the names of 17 non-carrier ambassadors and 15 carrier ambassadors. Former Nigerian ambassador to Guinea-Bissau, Godwin Agama, and former Nigerian ambassador to the Republic of Benin, Lawrence Obijakin, described ambassadorial service as a specialized field with room for brilliant people in the reserve. They did not fault the president's choice of candidates, but appealed that greater thought be paid to preparedness and duration of training.
I think that what we need to underscore here is that diplomacy is a specialized service. It's not just like domestic public administration, where you have little training. Even that requires some training, but diplomacy requires complex training, because ambassador could utter something at his mission, and it could derail the relationship between the country he's accredited to and his own country that sent him. So we have all this protocol of doing things, the way you speak, the way you couch your language. Even when you are angry with your host, you are not happy, you convey a message in a way that is pleasant. And I see a lot of names, recognizable names in that list. Former governors, former ministers, very brilliant people, very experienced people in politics. Politics generally is not diplomacy. So I think that maybe in a subsequent list, if they are taking a note of this, they could draw more on the career people who are still active and serving, or if there's a death of that, they could go back to people that are in the reserve. Because just like you have in the military, generals on reserve, you also have ambassadors on the reserve who are still capable, dynamic, and up and doing, and could serve Nigeria very well.
You can watch more on Ambassador Agama as well as Ambassador Lawrence Obishakin's thoughts on the ambassadorial list and more on our Foreign Affairs program. Diplomatic Channel, it airs at 8:30 p.m. on Sky 515 in the UK and at 11:30 p.m. on DSTV 420 right here on Channels Television. Pharmaceutical industry sources say a major deal between the UK and the United States to lower threatened tariffs is expected imminently. The deal comes after several pharmaceutical giants decided to either reduce spending in the UK or increase their US investments following threats of tariffs as high as 100% on branded drug imports. Pharmaceuticals are one of the UK's biggest exports to the US, which is also the biggest market by far for big UK drug makers, including GSK and AstraZeneca. At the start of the year, US President Donald Trump announced massive increases to taxes on goods imported to the country, which he argued would create jobs and boost American manufacturing. In June, Trump signed a deal with the UK to remove some trade barriers between the countries and reduce levies on most goods exported to the US to 10%, but pharmaceuticals remained a big unknown. We're back in Africa as South African President Cyril Ramaphosa confirms formal handover of the G20 presidency to the United States. But in his address to the nation, he condemned individuals and organizations who continue to spread disinformation about genocide in South Africa, saying that such people are endangering the country's national interests.
Regrettable that the United States of America, which is a founding member of the G20, and which takes over the presidency of the G20 from South Africa in 2026, chose not to participate in the G20 Leaders Summit and the final meetings leading up to that summit. It is even more unfortunate that the reasons the United States gave for its non-participation were based on baseless and false allegations that South Africa is perpetrating genocide against Afrikaners and the confiscation of land from white people. This is blatant misinformation about our country. We were most pleased that many organizations, businesses, and individuals from the United States participated in large numbers in G20-related activities, such as the Business 20 Summit and the G20 Social Summit. South Africa valued their constructive and enthusiastic participation. Earlier this week, we formally handed over the G20 presidency for 2026 to the United States, observing the appropriate diplomatic protocols. A few days ago, President Donald Trump made a statement to the effect that South Africa would not be invited to participate in the G20 in the United States. He repeated untrue statements about genocide against Afrikaners and the confiscation of land from white people in our country. We must make it clear that South Africa is one of the founding members of the G20, and South Africa is therefore a member of the G20 in its own name and right. We will continue to participate as a full, active, and constructive member of the G20.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. More health news now. Russian scientists have come up with what could be described as the latest breakthrough in the world of cloning, presenting two cows, Milka and Isoka, both clones born in Krasnodar region. The experts succeeded in reducing the weight of newborns, with Milka in particular around half compared to the first clone, Zvedovchka, born in March of 2024. A new size in line with the breed standard for regular calves. Altragen Biotechnology Laboratory CEO Victor Pogrebniak says they conducted a series of experiments on creating embryos, changing environments and other various factors in order to change the live weight. As a result, they achieved what was almost impossible, ending up with three cows. One weighed 32 kilograms, another 56 kilograms, and a third 75 kilograms. He says the clones were born healthy, with no developmental abnormalities observed. It also came from cells of the highest yielding cows in terms of milk production, with quantities now set to be carefully monitored. And talk about trying to keep up the wonder and awe of the festive season. Rio de Janeiro kicked off the holiday season yesterday with an 80-meter floating Christmas tree of Botafogo Beach, dazzling crowds along the shoreline. This spectacle was unveiled, as we said, on Sunday, celebrating the inauguration with thousands of people lining the streets to watch the fireworks display. Once switched on, the structure cycles through a spectrum of colors, creating a vivid backdrop framed by Christ the Redeemer and Sugarloaf Mountain. The tree, roughly the height of a 30-story building, features 2.3 million LED lights, 1,300 strobe lights, and 10,000 streamers. Those watching said the tree brought some warmth to their hearts. That'll be all on The World Today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.